exploring multi-generational trauma and substance abuse in Indigenous communities. Discover how ancestral trauma influences substance abuse in Indigenous populations, and learn about healing through breaking emotional cycles. Understanding the link between generational trauma and substance abuse in Indigenous communities. You know, when we talk about substance abuse in Indigenous populations, it's not as simple as just pointing fingers or saying it's about individual choices. There's this deeply rooted history that shapes those experiences, what researchers often call intergenerational trauma, or ancestral trauma, and even transgenerational trauma. These terms all point to the way trauma passes down from one generation to the next, shaping behavior, health, and emotional well-being in ways people might not even realize. Let's think about it like this. Generations ago, Indigenous communities faced things like forced relocation, cultural assimilation through residential or boarding schools, and systemic racism. These experiences caused intense family trauma, breaking bonds and erasing cultural identities, which fundamentally affected their survivors' mental health. When trauma is left unaddressed, it creates this inherited trauma, wounds that get passed down through families and communities. So how does that connect to something like substance abuse? Well, for many Indigenous peoples, substances sometimes become a way to cope with the pain and the unresolved grief of these layered traumas. It's important to understand that substance abuse here isn't just individual. It's part of a bigger story, a story that includes multi-generational trauma and the struggle to reclaim identity and heal. What I find compelling is how subtle this passed-down trauma can be. It's not always about explicit memories, but sometimes about emotional patterns and family dynamics, things like hypervigilance, distrust, or emotional numbness that subtly shape how people respond to stress or hardship. This web of inherited trauma often influences generations without anyone fully realizing it at first. If you're curious about unpacking this further, there's a book that does a fantastic job of explaining how these emotional patterns cycle through families and offer techniques to break free from them. It's called The Generational Algorithm. This book explores strategies to rewrite the emotional programming we might have unknowingly inherited, helping people to heal on a deeper level. It's especially relevant because healing from family trauma and ancestral trauma requires more than just addressing surface issues. It means recognizing that the struggles some Indigenous communities face with substance abuse are part of a complex history, and healing has to happen on multiple levels: individual, family, and community. Moreover, acknowledging transgenerational trauma is a step beyond the usual conversations about addiction. It reframes the narrative, showing that recovery and wellness aren't just about personal willpower, but about understanding the broader context. This insight can shift how services are developed and delivered, making them more respectful and effective in Indigenous settings. What really stands out to me is how some Indigenous leaders and healers are blending traditional knowledge and modern trauma science. They're using ceremonies, storytelling, and community-based programs that honor cultural roots to complement treatments focused on breaking these cycles of inherited trauma. This holistic approach is powerful. It supports healing that's in tune with identity and culture. So, if this conversation has sparked your interest, or if you want to explore more about how generational patterns shape us, and how to break free from those old cycles, check out The Generational Algorithm. It's a great resource that offers guidance on rewriting emotional legacies and finding a path toward lasting healing. Understanding family trauma and the multi-generational trauma that many Indigenous populations carry can help all of us, whether we're directly affected or supporting loved ones, approach these challenges with more compassion and clarity. After all, healing the past helps build a better foundation for the future. Take a moment to look into The Generational Algorithm. It might just change how you see emotional healing and the enduring strength in overcoming inherited wounds.